Welcome to Free Range Flock. We were once the latchkey kids who came home to an empty house after school. We were feral, resilient, cynical, and innovative. Older than Google. Our teenage faces were never posted on social media. The internet was just an idea in our youth. Now we are older, wiser, and thriving. Our independent ways will continue to serve us. We plan to keep defying the odds, and we will carve our own path. With grace, with humor, with joy. Our way. We've been through some stuff. We will continue to keep pushing, and we are not going anywhere. The former latchkey kids are now the Free Range Flock.
I feel like my head is all over the place today when it comes to this upcoming episode, just because there's just so much to unpack and learn and unlearn from this topic. We're talking about, all those big turning points in our life when we had to be honest with ourselves and look in the mirror and go, this is not working, and find that happiness and validation from within. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot, but we're going to bring Kristen in today to help us unpack this all. So any kind of thoughts going in before we go in?
I'm just excited to have this conversation with Kristen and see what she has to say.
Yes, me too. So we're here today with Kristen. She was joined us for our last podcast episode, and we talked about societal norms and really helping Gen Z kind of figure it out. None of us have figured it out, but hopefully getting it better. Improving when we looked at relationships and those gender norms, and just getting it better than we had it before. But now we want to change a little focus here and focus more on ourselves, right, and the expectations that we put on ourselves as Gen X. And we've all had those turning points, and we've talked about them in several episodes about those turning points in our life. Kristen, what was your big turning point in your life, or one of many turning points in your life?
I was going to just jump in and say my divorce, but it actually started well before then, when, no good marriage ends in divorce is the old saying, right? So it's usually a gradual thing that happens. And if, looking back in retrospect, I realized that the end of my marriage probably started about 7 years before. Mm-hmm. And I recognized that there was a point that I had wanted to leave, but I couldn't because I didn't have a job at the time. I'd gotten laid off, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I had 3 young children at that time, right? And I realized that I couldn't afford to leave.
Wow.
I didn't know that North Carolina was a 50-50 state, right? And I vowed to myself that I would never get into that position again. That if things didn't correct, that the next time it got to the point where I was at that point, that I would be able to stand on my own 2 feet. And I think that's probably where a lot of as we were talking the last time we talked about the societal expectations, right? That you get married, you have your kids, and you stay married, and you sit on the front porch in a rocking chair and hold hands and watch the grandkids play in the front yard, right? And that's the way it's supposed to be, that divorce is, awful. Mm-hmm. And it's not a walk in the park by any stretch of the imagination. However, depending on which side of it, ideally, if you're going to go through a divorce, it's an amicable, right? Mm-hmm. That both parties go, you know what, this isn't working anymore.
Right.
And we're not happy, and we're not on this earth forever. And you need to live happy.
Yeah.
And it was, when it did happen in 2016, it was the most freeing and liberating moment of my life.
Wow.
It was like a weight had just, the proverbial weight lifted off of my shoulders. You know, there were some extenuating circumstances that led to our separation and divorce. But it was go time. It was go time for me, as, you know, I thrived on the outside.
Oh, okay.
So I had been missing, and I'm just going to use the word that it is, and it's validation. I didn't recognize that it was validation I was seeking, but I probably started, quote unquote, dating a lot sooner than I should have. I really, you know, there's a kind of a general rule of thumb that you should wait about a year going through a big breakup like that, or whether it's divorce or a breakup, before you do it and work on yourself. Well, I was like, oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. Look at me. I'm having the great time of my life. I have all these people that are validating me. It was a shit show. I was a shit show, and I didn't recognize it. So it took me a while, and actually I was very fortunate with one person that I met during my separation, and, you know, really we were like best friends, and we had lots of great deep conversations, and I read, and, you know, I learned that I am an anxious avoidant, which I can, you know, some people say that women have daddy issues. I didn't have daddy issues. I had mommy issues. Well, just, you know, my parents divorced when I was 3.
Okay.
So, I mean, I and then she remarried, and my stepdad was my, you know, he was my legal father. He adopted me. But I was a latchkey kid at 7 years old. So, and my mom, I love her to death. She's a wonderful human being. She's not very maternal. So that hyper independence is usually a trauma-based thing. And for me, I was always on my own. I had to do things for myself. So I was, you know, and then in a marriage where, you know, he came from that very June and Ward Cleaver growing up. So, and my mother-in-law was a fabulous person. Like, she was made to be a grandmother. And, but, you know, I would watch when they were in town, and, you know, his dad would be like, Gracie, can you go get me something to drink? Like, she's sitting there quilting, and he's like the same distance to the kitchen. And he's like, what do you want? And the cool thing about my ex-husband is he knew never to do that with me. Like, you know where the kitchen is?
Yeah.
Kind of like when we were talked, you know, with Jules, you know, it's like, you just walk through the kitchen to get to me.
Don't walk through the kitchen and say, I'm hungry.
Right.
Stop and get something.
Yeah, exactly. You know, or at least grab an apple as you come to tell me you're hungry.
Yeah, right.
But it just... Oh, I just tangent on that one. Sorry. But yeah, it was... I had to learn a lot about myself. And, you know, I read a lot, you know, as far as like attachment theories and, you know, the different, you know, love languages. I'm a big fan of love languages because I think it's very true. And I recognized, but that's where I was going with that. My ex-husband was like, he wanted to control me. I'm like, you can't control this. This is not the person, but I let it happen. And it was just, and it took me probably 3 years of going through the whole date. And I never dated anybody very seriously, but I recognized the ones that I was the most attached to, and that were the ones that had no interest in, and so there was a lot of chasing. And finally, once I stopped, I recognized that it was, you know, everything we are comes from our childhood. And that was that me trying to prove myself to my parents, and it was showing up in the men that I was going out with. And so I really had to do a lot of digging deep. And interestingly, as we were talking about COVID, my ex-husband got stuck. He was living in Ohio at the time and with his folks. And he had been on a business trip, and he left Ohio to go to Pitt to pick up Sydney for spring break. And as I refer to it as it ended up being the longest spring break ever because that's like 4 days later, the world started shutting down. And I remember so clearly, I was working for a Greek company, and that Friday, Steve texted me at the office. Steve is my ex-husband, and his parents had told him not to come back. And I was like, what? I was hot. I was so mad. So he ended up not locked in my house. I mean, he was free to go. But and I
was stuck.
He was stuck.
Okay.
Until Memorial Day. So I am living in my house with my 3. It was like being married again. Separate quarters, obviously. But as I had gone through the process of dating, and I'm going to jump back a little bit, my dad had moved in with me in 2015, and or maybe 2014. Anyways, no, we separated in 2016. What year is this? 2024. So 2017, my dad I moved him up from Texas, and he was living with me and the girls at the time. He ended up passing away. And the one thing that I noticed when I was dating is, Steve and I always had a very amicable relationship after the first 18 months. The first 18 months was awful, but him moving to Ohio helped. Just kind of getting him out of my backyard kind of thing. And we both tell this story. And I just was not happy with any of the people that I was meeting. Online dating it's
awful.
It is awful. It is a cesspool of every broken human being known to man or woman.
It's brutal.
It is brutal. And, it was new to me at the time. But again, validation. Oh, look at all these people. They're swiping on me. Woo.
Yeah.
And how I survived it, I will never know. But it forced me to do the work on myself. And the one thing that kind of became very apparent in the work that my ex-husband was doing, he was doing a lot of his own work. And so we'll jump ahead to the punchline, which is my ex-husband and I are dating.
Wow.
A lot of this makes a lot more sense when you know how it ends. And so I just kept looking, and there was the only thing the man cared about was making sure that I was taken care of and happy. And that's how he was showing up now. He never did that during our marriage.
Oh, wow.
Ever did he do that. I mean, he sort of did. I shouldn't say never, because he did. But not to the point. And when my dad died, and we waited, my sisters are down in Texas, and we just waited to Thanksgiving of that year to have his memorial service. And Steve left Ohio, came to North Carolina, and as a family unit. Now, when we were married, I could never get the man to go to Texas to see my family, ever. Like, you would have thought I'd asked him to walk on hot coals, which is kind of what Texas is, but that's okay. As a family, he drove from Ohio to North Carolina and with us to Texas and back. It was a 4-day trip. And I was like, there was not a single person I had met from the time that I had separated to that moment that had ever done something like that for me. And so we started talking, and that's why I kind of went back a little bit, because during COVID, that's all we could do was talk. And we had some really, really heavy conversations. And, we both expressed the things that we had learned about ourselves and, through our own self-work, as well as the public work, as I call it, dating other people. Right. And, everybody thought that we were going to get back together, and we didn't. It wasn't until later at the end of the year that I said, do you want to try dating? And it's been great. But we took the time to do the work.
Right.
And it got, again, that's why, you remember how we were talking the other time about, when you're 20 and in your 20s, you don't even know yourself.
No.
I mean, it took me, I was 50, y'all. And it was like 51 before we got back together. I mean, so you can't work on yourself when you're in those situations, especially if you have a partner that doesn't understand and appreciate self-work. And as humans, we need a lot of work.
Right. And we were talking earlier off camera, or off mic, about how everyone out there is broken in some way. and realizing that and just kind of being honest, like, here's all my stuff, and being honest with yourself. And I think that's what a lot of us in our 50s are finding, is that it's just time to put our cards on the table, because the masquerade just takes so much energy and time. You're tired.
Very much so. And I think it's finding people whose, I hate to use the word brokenness, because we are broken, but we're not irreparable.
Right, exactly.
We're just.
But what's the old saying? The cracks are how the light gets in.
Exactly. So our cracks are compatible with the other person's cracks. It's whatever your neuroses are, that they're compatible with your partner's neuroses, and that's a process. Of some things just can't be fixed too. I mean, it's just like who you are.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are incompatibilities there, but I think that self-work is essential, because you have to know yourself before you can love another person.
That's exactly right. And I remember at one point when I was, in the dating, active dating tour of duty, that it probably about 3 years in, I was like, if you're, I think I probably even had it in my dating profile at one point. It says, like, if you're in therapy, you're sexy. Like, self-work is sexy.
Well, but were you doing the self-work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I'm just talking, like, it's, and especially the Gen X men, who are like, or even the, really young boomers, that is, you're broken. You don't go to therapy. That means, there's something wrong with you. And it's like, no, that's actually a really good thing. But I think you have to, at some point, just get tired of your own crap. And then once you get tired of your own crap, but I think 50 was a very liberating time for that as well, because 40, I love turning 40, but I really love turning 50. It could have just stopped right there without the dying part. I would have been totally fine. But you lose your filter, and you truly realize that our time is short.
Yeah.
Like, if we're lucky, we maybe have another 25, 30 years, right?
Yep.
So, like, if I can make it to 80, I'm good. I don't think I'm going to make it much longer than 80 unless I'm really, really healthy. I mean, I'll live as long as I can. It's not my choice, right? But you just get tired of it. You get tired of the filter. You get tired of pretending. And it's a really liberating feeling. We're totally off topic on the whole divorce thing.
No, but I mean, but that was your turning point.
Yeah.
That was your, let me be honest with myself, and like, it was a process. It wasn't just instantaneous. It took having that divorce and then trying to date, and then, okay, I really got to do some work on myself.
Right.
And I think a lot of us are in that stage too. I think that we're in good company, that we've all had our turning point of some point.
Well, and I think at our age, think about, like, right now where you are with Jules being 11, right? Those first, like, especially like 13 years, you are busy. You're so busy you can't hear yourself think, right? And it was taking that person out of my life that I started to hear my own thoughts again, right? And you have to get to that moment where you go, okay, it's time. And, lucky are those of us that do it.
Right. And that, I mean, it's not easy.
No.
It was, this act of bravery that you said, okay, this is not working anymore, and this is going to be an inconvenience, and it's going to be a lot of work, but you did it.
Right.
And that's what's important, is that you listened to that turning point and you acted. There's people out there who are, maybe listening, that are just kind of pushing through because the expectation is I should just push through and stay married until the end of time, because that's how my parents did it, and or my grandparents did it. And the reality is no. I mean, they probably, weren't living as long as some of us might live.
Oh, absolutely.
Or they probably weren't happy. And I want to be happy. I want to enjoy my life and enjoy, do things and.
Life's too short. I know it sounds like, and it is a cliche, but it is true. And, we've reached the point where, ideally we stay very healthy, we stay very fit, but, the odds are a little more not in our favor that things are going to start happening, which is the reason why financial advisors don't advise people after age 55 to get married. Because if, the chances of us having a catastrophic something physically or medically are much larger. And, if you're married, then guess what? If the person, you or the other person, passes away, that if you're married, now you've got all that medical debt and no help. And I know it sounds awful to break it all the way down mechanical like that, but my mom will never get married.
Right.
That's one of the main reasons, and that's probably the reason her last relationship ended, was because the person wanted to get married, and she's like, no, absolutely
don't
not.
Need it, yeah.
I don't need it.
But we'll say I've got some hope, because the language, the way people are talking about the topic now, about if they're in a relationship but they want separate bedrooms or separate households, that's becoming more of an okay conversation to have. Or even open relationships. I've had several close friends who are married who said, you know what, we're going to have an open marriage, and because I still love you, but I want to do these other things as well. Our parents would have never,
absolutely not,
ever had. And I love the fact that we're now seeing that, and it's an okay conversation to have.
Yes.
Love it, love it.
And I think the younger generation, your kids' age, are instrumental in that.
Yes.
Because you and I have talked about the fact that they're much more open about talking about personal stuff, whether it's their, neurodiversity that they want to talk about, whether it's their open relationships, whether it's their sexual preferences. Those are things that are normalized now.
Right.
Whereas when we were young, that you wouldn't have ever talked about any of those things.
No.
And there's still a lot of stigma about those kinds
there
of
is,
things.
but I think, and it's interesting that you talk about the open relationships, but that was something that I really learned a lot about there during my single days too, and it really opened my mind, because I had that like, oh my God, that's cheating. And I remember Steve and I having this conversation. It's like, it's only cheating if you lie.
Right.
It's only cheating if you lie. And, together living apart, the separate bedrooms because somebody's a snorer and the other one's not, and somebody's a morning person. It's like, normal is, what was it that you said?
Normal is a setting on the dryer.
That's exactly right.
There's no such thing as a normal when it comes to people.
That's exactly right. And it's normal to me. It's normal to them. And, I remember having talking to my girls about, the concept of open relationships. And I was like, as long as everybody in there is on the same page, it's okay.
Yeah.
Love is not a finite thing. I have 3 children. I love them all the same. I dating my ex-husband. I love him. Love is love. And it's just interesting to see people like, no, it has to be this way. It has to be a man and a woman. Right. And they have to get married by 25, and they have to have 1.2 children. No. God, can you imagine being that limited?
No.
I mean, I am not in an open relationship, but it's,
if it works for you, go for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And from afar, I have a professional colleague who is, over the past few years, he was married with children, and he's come out. And, he is very, very gay and very, very proud of it. And he's also very proud of the fact that he's in a couple of different open relationships. And I'm like, you go. He's not afraid at all. And it's so cool to see someone, and he's probably in his 60s, finally being who he is.
Right.
Or who he's probably been his entire life.
Right.
But because he had to fit it into that shoebox, it took him that long. So I'd be out there proud and running and doing all the things.
Yeah, definitely.
If I've been denied for 60 years, hell yeah.
I think we use the word masking a lot with neurodiversity, but I think we all wear masks.
Right. Absolutely.
And your professional colleague friend is a perfect example. He had to wear that mask.
Yep.
And now he's feeling comfortable enough to be able to take it off.
And I love it.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love watching him. And but yeah, you're right. We all do wear masks, whether it's the heterosexual mask of being married with 2.5 children and a dog and a cat, or whether it's being a single parent. And it's just, there's so many masks, and people just need to stop judging.
Right.
That's the thing right there.
Yeah.
On every single level in your life, there's
Absolutely.
so much gatekeeping and judgment that goes on out there, and it's just like, if that is making that person happy, just let them do it.
Absolutely.
Right.
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 It's not affecting you. Just let them be happy.
Right.
And when we were talking about this episode, some of the language that we were using was getting over yourself. And I think that's kind of a lovely place to end this, in that at the end of the day, be honest with yourself and get over yourself. If you're not happy, stop and make yourself happy. If it's not working, be honest. It could be the greatest thing that's ever happened to you. It could be your great turning point.
It could be. And you won't know until you just stop.
Exactly. Thank you, Kristen, for
Thanks,
coming today.
guys. Ladies, sorry.
Thank you.
So we did unpack a lot there with that episode. So I've got a lot of notes here, Sass, and I see you got a lot there too. What's the big things that stood out for you in our conversation with Kristen?
Well, I think one of the big ones that I don't know if we repeated after she said, but was the need to live happy. Because that is such an important thing that we don't prioritize in our lives very well. And if we are doing the work on ourselves, we have to find out what the things are that make us happy.
Right.
And
be honest.
And be honest about it. Yeah. And it's hard. It is hard work. But that one really stood out to me. How about you?
Yeah, just that whole needing your own space and needing that time. She talked about her husband, moving away, focusing on herself and reading. And it's such an important thing. But when people think of big things like divorce or leaving a job or completely changing how you're living your life, it's a very scary thing to do. And some people don't have the courage to do it, and some people do. But when you come out the other side, you're just wow, I can't. You almost feel like you've been living in the dark for so long, and it's like you're waking up for the first time.
And I think because she was framing it with her divorce, I think that she talked about at one point getting validation from the outside,
right?
But she hadn't done the work to validate herself,
right.
So that's a really important point too, which is you can't look externally for other people to make you happy. You have to, again, be able to validate yourself and to do that.
Look in the mirror and like who you see. You just do you think I look good? Do you think that whole do I look okay? Do I look okay? No, look in the mirror of your life and say, am I okay? Am I doing this right? Stop asking people for permission and just do what you need to do.
Just do it.
Yeah, it's like we said, get over yourself. You gotta just do it. Yeah, so important. But I did enjoy our conversation with Kristen. She had a lot of fun things to say and interesting things to say, places to take us. So
yeah. So, have you found us on social media yet? I know I ask that question all the time, but it's kind of we really want to hear from you. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, and we're on YouTube. So there's lots of different locations, and we want you to subscribe and and do all the things. Follow us, and we want to hear a conversation with you. And today's topic is about yourself. Doing the work internally. What are you doing to help validate yourself, to make yourself happy? Because we'd love to hear from you. And thanks for listening, y'all. Thank you for joining us for Free Range Flock. Our goal is to inspire and celebrate who we are, the Generation X kids who grew up and decided to do things their way, with grace, humor, and joy. This has been a production of Sassy Am. If you want to learn more about our podcast, follow our blog, share your positive insights about being a free ranger, or to suggest topics or guests for future episodes, please visit our website at sassayam.com. That's SASSAYAM.com. Keep pushing.